Hi, Dr. Kelly Watson here, and I'm going to talk today about small teaching. Small teaching is based on the book by Dr. James Lang called Small Teaching: Everyday Lessons from the Science of Learning, which basically combines cognitive science with practical experience in the classroom to showcase some new and innovative ways that we can enhance student learning in very small ways and with some small techniques and tricks. So think about for yourself what that means. You know, you're a learner, you've been in school for a long time. You probably have a pretty good idea of what works for you. So what small changes do you think need to be made? If you think back to some of um, the professors that you've had and some of the classroom experiences you've had, what would you change if you were the educator? The reason I'm asking that is the very first concept that we want to talk about today is this idea that prediction promotes engagement and learning. So what does that mean? Well, the core idea here is that encouraging students to make predictions before they learn new content actually primes their brains better to learn more effectively. When they try to guess the outcome or the concept before it's being taught, even if they guess wrong, their brains become more alert and receptive. Think about the aha, wait a minute, they've just asked me, what do I know? You haven't taught me yet, right? But now the brain is more alert and receptive. So, for example, asking students to predict what will happen in a case study or to hypothesize about a concept before instruction, it's going to increase their curiosity about the topic and it will increase their retention because what's happening is this technique is tapping into the brain's natural tendency to seek patterns and correct errors. So even if you get it wrong, your brain is retaining something because it's correcting the error. It's actually then going to have something to compare it to when you do provide the actual analysis. Um, so if you think about, how you could do this in a business context, well, for example, during a session on leadership theories, you could present a short case and then maybe the CEO is struggling with something. And then you could ask, which leadership theory do you predict is going to best explain the CEO's behavior? Let them take some time to guess and then only afterward present the actual analysis and the dominant theory. And while their brain is reconciling, either they got it correct, which is great. It means that they've now just reinforced that they can do this. Or even if they made a mistake, now they're going to remember the mistake and then remember what the right answer is. The second idea from this book is the idea that growth mindset and metacognition empowers learners. So what this means, and this is based on Carol Dweck's research on growth mindset, that you really want to reward students for effort and progress and for being able to recognize how they learn, what is the learning process itself about. And in so doing, realize that it is indeed a process that with effort can lead to success, that everyone can learn through engaging the right process. So, a practice like, for example, having a debrief at the end of a learning session about how the students learned and about what worked well, part that they felt most confident about in the session and where they struggled, can help the students recognize that struggle is part of the process and that it's okay that they struggled. So give them kind of that permission to have that safe space for that sort of struggle to be happening. And this is really important because students are often high achievers, especially business students, right? And they can be super hard on themselves. So just being able to reflect that this is a learning process, it's a normal learning process, that making mistakes is important, and that they can get through them will give them more control over their own development, over their own ability to do it. So what have we learned so far? We've talked about two different ideas. Think about them. Obviously, the reason I'm asking that question is because the third point, or the third concept here, is this idea that retrieval practice enhances memory. So getting students to recall information rather than just reviewing it. I could have just sat there and said, well, the two things we've reviewed so far, number one is predicting what we're going to learn. And then number two, building a growth mindset by, taking the time to evaluate the process of learning. You would not have engaged in the same way as you would if I said, okay, what are the two things that we just talked about? So it's this idea of a testing effect, that the act of retrieving information actually improves retention. So a couple of easy ways to do this in a class would be starting the class, for example, with like a 2-minute quiz, having students write down what they can remember about a previous topic. Or you could engage in a discussion like I did with an open-ended question. Who remembers what we talked about last time? Small 2-minute thing. It takes almost no time. And yet it's going to do a couple things. Number one, it's going to force them to recall, which is going to improve their long-term memory of it. And secondly, you get to find out if maybe they didn't get it right the first time. Now you have an opportunity to say, wait a minute, that's not what I taught you. So let's review, let's go backwards. And that could save you a lot of time long-term, and make the learning more effective. It doesn't matter if they write it down or you just have a conversation about it. They can both be effective techniques. All right, so the fourth one is this idea of interleaving and mixing up content and how that improves mastery. And I specifically said interleaving here. And interleaving is a learning strategy where different types of problems or topics are mixed together rather than grouped into chunks or modules during practice or instruction. And the idea here is that by doing that, it's forcing the learners to discriminate between the different types of models or the different concepts, and then apply the right one in the right situation. So think about when you were in school, maybe, and you were learning math. They would show you a way to do a problem. And then they would make it more complicated. And then they'd make it more complicated again, and they would build. And so that by the time you were, well into the module, you had built these concepts and applied them in many different situations. And how much more effective that is than if they just chunked it and taught you how to learn this particular way, and this particular way in isolation. It makes it much more difficult then to go back and apply it in the right way. They just become things that you memorized in a sense and didn't have mastery of. And, I know it's always frustrating for students. They're always asking you, is this cumulative? Is this test going to be cumulative? But the cumulative nature of it is actually an important part of this learning process. So resist the temptation to keep everything in chunks, but actually rather start to mix it together. And be confident that that's actually going to do a better job for your students. Now, there's one caveat to this. If it's unclear that concepts are different in this mixing, then you may struggle with students just being confused overall. They do need to have scaffolded learning. It just doesn't have to always be in discrete modules, okay? All right, next one is the idea that connection and meaning enhance motivation and retention. So what does this mean? Well, the author here suggests that fostering connections for students to how this content is going to be important in their lives, help them meet their own personal goals, or be connected to others, will help them learn better, will help them be able to retain the information more. It's really being able to answer for them the why do I care about this at the same time that they're learning. So, you can do this through storytelling, you can do this through real world examples. You can even do it by having students reflect on how what they're learning relates to their experience. So you don't always have to connect the dots for them. You can help them connect the dots for themselves. How's this going to impact my future career? When am I going to be able to use this in the workplace? Even just a brief, why do you think this matters, can give them the it can be the catalyst in their brain for, wait a minute, I need to think about how is this going to work for me, and when am I going to use this again? So it allows them to organize the information and make deeper connections. So what's a way that you could do this in the class? Well, you could ask students to pair up, because there is some research that suggests that when they work in teams, or when they connect and collaborate together, that they're able to make these connections more strongly, and say, which of these theories could inform a challenge that you're facing at work right now? Some of your students may say, well, I'm not at work right now, or I don't have any work experience to pull on. But in those cases, they will have other experiences they can pull on, such as volunteer experiences, roommate experiences, or things like that. So you could still find ways for them to connect it. And you can also have them sort of predict ahead, well, I probably would use this in this situation. You could also just bring in case studies, detailed case studies that you've pulled from workplace experiences that will help them do the same thing. As long as you make sure that the case study is not just kept in the abstract, but that they're actually able to, make some decisions or think about how you would apply this in the future based on those cases. So really connecting theory to their professional context is going to make learning more meaningful for them, support retention, and also support motivation by showing that these academic tools that we're showing them actually have practical value in solving real-world business problems. So overall, the point of this book is that small changes can make a really big impact. And we all know that time and energy are limited, so we don't want to have to make an entire curriculum overhaul to be more effective with our students. So oftentimes it can be something as small as just, the way you frame the lesson at the beginning, or the way that you bring in a real world example can actually make a really big impact. So one of the things that I do is in my lesson plans, I actually have a space for reflection after I've delivered the lesson to the students. I will take 5 minutes, write down what worked, what didn't work in my, in the actual lesson plan itself. And then the next time I use that lesson plan, I go back and look at these reflection and say, wait, what did I learn? And is there a small change that I can make that's going to help make this lesson? It's going to reframe it so that I have a more effective time with it. So I hope all of this was helpful. Good luck with your teaching.